What's up, Wildcide besties and baddies? I'm Bailey.
And I'm Chelsea, and we're here to walk you through the wild sides.
From homicides to hosticides and everything in between.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride.
So, Bailey.
What's up?
We're back, and it's my turn. It's my turn to deliver a case, and I know that I had promised you a cult case because I kind of like cult cases, but you don't. And you're like, well, then do a cult case. I don't care. Blah, blah. So I'm not cult case, but I'm doing another case that you will hate.
Oh.
Just as much.
I don't feel like I can hate a case more than I do cult cases. Cult. C-U-L-T. Not cold cases. Cult cases.
Yeah. So not a cult case, but...
Okay, a clue. How does this relate to anything in the general public's lives?
In the general public's lives?
Yeah, like anybody can relate to.
Oh, so this is going to show you that you can't believe everything you hear.
Okay.
That states have some wild laws, and apparently aliases get you, you can get whatever you want if you have an alias.
As long as they don't know what your alias is or to whom it's connected, right?
Well, and if you're if you're pretty much petty, like if all your stuff is just petty, like within the boundaries of the law, then nobody really cares, right?
Yeah.
Until it's not. And then obviously you care. And then obviously you get books written about you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So shout out to Patrick Gallagher. He released a book back in 2020 called Till Death Do Us, a true crime story of bigamy and murder.
Bigamy?
Mm-hmm. Not bigotry, but bigamy.
What's bigamy?
So bigamy is when you have like multiple marriages. Yeah, so bigamy is the act of marrying someone while still legally married to another person.
Is that not polygamy?
So I think polygamy is more like you have multiple spouses and they all kind of know about each other.
Oh, so then bigamy is getting married, kind of like, okay. So
shady.
Getting married, but not the other parties aren't aware that they're marrying a married person.
Correct.
I feel like this is absolutely something I should know, but alas, here we are.
Alas, here we are, right? So I had to kind of take a double take when I saw the title of this book. I was like, what does bigotry have anything to do with murder? I mean, obviously there are links there, but then I realized that I was not reading the word bigotry. I was reading the word bigamy. And that was one of those, like, I had to dust off the dictionary in my mind to, like, I think that's what that means. It's just not something that I use very often.
Yeah. So because I'm pretty much on the spectrum, I need data. And I had to look it up. So bigamy is defined as the act of going through a marriage ceremony with one person while legally married to the other. Polygamy is having more than one spouse at a time. So one must engage in bigamy to experience polygamy.
Correct. But again, I think it's more of a mutual understanding, right? I think people who are polygamist, there's a mutual understanding between all the parties of what's going on.
Oh my gosh, Chelsea, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole now. Here's a website that's like the 10 differences between bigamy versus polygamy.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think it's kind of within like the social construct, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
I did not plan on any of this kind of being a piggyback off of last week's case, but here we are back in Idaho and Utah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think the best way to start this off is essentially how Patrick Gallagher starts his book off, which, y'all, this book really is so good. He really did a great job covering this case and writing this book. So we are going to start with a telegram that was received on August 20th, 1945.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. The telegram states, "Dearest Brody, memories of our nights together so many years ago still flood my dreams today. I have never forgotten you. How could I forget a man like you? I'd love to tell you my story. Please write with your address if interested. Gladys, Ralph's, Lincoln."
Is she responding to an ad in the paper?
I, you know, there, I don't know what was happening in 1945 in the West, out here in the West, but I'll just stop at that. But yeah,
Okay.
she was not, but you would think she was. So let's talk about Gladys. You want to?
Yeah.
Gladys June Ralphs was born in 1906 to William and Ann Ralphs of Minidoka, Idaho, and was the very attractive, very witty, and headstrong daughter that was smack dab in the middle of four boys, right? So they
Okay.
had a total of five kids, four boys, and then sweet little beautiful Gladys right here in the middle. Her brothers all loved and doted over the princess of the family and nicknamed her Flea, which the only thing I can think of when I think of Flea is the bassist for Red Hot Chili Peppers. But maybe back in the 40s, or I guess technically back in the 20s, maybe that was,
I think it's one of those things like when you meet somebody with a different name, it only takes getting to know them for like 5 minutes and you're like, absolutely, this person 100% is a flea. And I don't even view it as like the original sense of the word.
yeah, I think so. So Gladys was the type that could always find trouble, even within a strict Mormon community. And her brothers were always there to either ease the tension, make excuses for her, or flat bail her out.
Uh-huh.
Right. But she was charming and she was pretty and she was all the things. And so people just kind of let it slide. And that was essentially her entire childhood, right? Was just like causing a ruckus and then somebody coming in and bailing her out. So by 1928, Gladys had found the love of her life and married her first husband, William Hendricks. But by August 1928, that same year, Gladys had divorced the love of her life, William, and was now swooning as she tied the knot to Albert Ernest Richardson just a few months after the divorce from old Will.
This woman's a love addict or a black widow. One of the two.
Gladys and Albert, they got married in Logan, Utah, and then had moved back to Idaho to live in Burley, Idaho. So people marry and divorce, even back in the 20s, people got married, people got divorced. But I don't know if a lot of people did. This seems taboo to me, but she essentially monkey barred from William to Albert, right? So before the divorce was even final, before the papers, the ink had dried, she was already in a love affair with Albert.
Wasn't that like Elizabeth Taylor? So she was Elizabeth Tayloring
She
it?
probably was. She might have wanted to be. And then while Gladys was still married to William there in Burley, Idaho, she started a hot love affair with the good doctor, Dr. Willis David Broadhurst, or better known as WD. Not WD-40, just WD. He'd set up a chiropractic practice and was providing the small town of Burley with his good looks and his chiropractic care. And Gladys had a bad back. So even though WD was 11 years her senior, that didn't stop Gladys from entering this steamy love affair with Dr. Broadhurst. So I feel like we all know that, Bailey, you are a therapist, and I'm hoping that our listeners are starting to understand that I kind of really love all things history, and I especially love this time in history, like from the 1880s to like the 1930s, right? And when I think of Gladys, I am just envisioning this super charismatic, rebellious kind of, living footloose and fancy free.
Yeah. Well, what's so funny is literally you describe Gladys as this like super charming, bubbly person, and I literally think of Yzma off of The Emperor's New Groove.
I mean, that really makes a lot of sense now that I think about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a surprising shift from the previous events, Gladys didn't divorce Albert and marry WD. But as a result of the affair, Gladys's second marriage did end in divorce, and WD picked up and moved out of Burley, Idaho, and started a practice out in Caldwell, Idaho.
Is that literally the same place
that we were just in? Oh my gosh, I think it is, Bailey.
Like the Caldwell Ranch?
Yes. Oh, crap. I think it was.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to dig into that. I did not even think about that.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So she married the first guy, but they got a divorce. She went after the second guy, Alfred. And in the middle of this marriage, she starts having a love affair with the chiropractor, WD. And because of that, the second marriage failed. And now she's with the third dude, WD.
No, she doesn't go with him. He moves to Caldwell, Idaho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I was like, it's kind of weird that they didn't end up together. So after the second divorce, Gladys would take a break from love. And for the next 7 years, she would travel and sing in the family band that was entitled the Ralph's Novelty Orchestra.
Okay.
So her family had a family band, and they traveled around the West performing at shows. Gladys, on top of being beautiful, was musically inclined. Not only was she a fabulous singer, but she could also play the piano and the accordion. In fact, many people compared her voice to the up-and-coming star, Deanna Durbin. During the 7 years of traveling with the band, Gladys was continuously covered in attention from men that she would meet at shows and events. Gladys would eventually land in Sacramento, California, and that's where she would meet husband number 3, Carroll M. Anderson. He was a year younger than Gladys, but according to their marriage certificate, Carroll Anderson had married Gladys Elaine, age 30. She decided that shaving 2 years off of her age and changing her middle name was a great way to kick off her new chapter and new marriage.
Okay.
The couple moved to Westwood, California. And let me tell you, Gladys found her paradise. Westwood was a quick drive to Beverly Hills or Santa Monica, and the town was buzzing with people and shops and drama, right? She was miles away from her little nowhere Idaho upbringing. It was 1939. The Great Depression was coming to an end, and California was rich with glitter and glam and men. Lots and lots of men.
Oh, I bet Gladys was happy about that.
So, fun fact, Westwood, California was the home to Red River Lumber Company, and the company bought the rights to the story of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. And they used that story and created this image of Paul Bunyan as an advertising pamphlet to bring lumberjacks out to that area.
Interesting. Yeah.
Isn't that so interesting? So Gladys was literally surrounded by big, strapping lumberjacks, and she couldn't handle it. Like, she was
That.
squirming. Now, Carol, which is her third husband, he was one of these lumberjacks, right? Like, he was this big, burly, handsome man. But unfortunately, he was not going to be Gladys's forever lumberjack.
Oh.
The two would end up driving to Reno, Nevada to finalize their divorce by the end of 1939. But strangely enough, Reno was also the place that they got married. So why were they in Reno all the time? Why did she get married to him in Reno, but then they lived in California, but then they moved back to Reno or went back to Reno just to get a divorce? Like, I don't really know. Like, they don't really say why Reno was always the place for her.
Yeah.
But Reno's going to be a reoccurring thing.
So how old is she by this point? Like divorcing her third husband?
So she is 32. She lied and said she was 30 on her marriage certificate, and her marriages, including this third marriage, they only last for a few months at a time.
Yeah.
But she's 32 and on her third divorce.
Mm.
Now, it would be in Reno that Gladys Elaine Ralphs would marry her fourth husband, Virgil D. Warner, in June of 1940.
Did nobody teach this woman that she did not have to marry them? She could just date them.
Well, again, Bailey, I think it goes hand in hand with the culture back then, right? Like, people got married. I mean, also people didn't get divorced, but at the same time, there's got to be some like, well, that's what you do. You marry people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like she was more, and I'm sure there's 100 layers to this, but sounds like she was more obsessed with the fantasy of marriage.
Right.
Than the actual, like, commitment.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
I don't know. It almost makes you wonder, like, is she addicted to not only the chase, but like the chase and the capture of them marrying her, like getting them to marry her. And then after that point, then it's like, well, it's on to the next chase. I don't know.
The clinical term for that is conquest, a conquestor or conquesting. And it's basically like the analogy that I use is fishing. It's like catch and release fishing. And so, you spend all these hours fishing for this big, marlin, and you catch it, you take a picture with it, and then you release it. Like, you don't have any intention to do anything else with it. And if we wanted to go into like attachment theory with that stuff, most of the time these people are very fearful, avoidant attachment style. And so it's very much like there are two fears. You have a fear of intimacy and a fear of abandonment. And so if they leave, then it triggers your fear of abandonment. And if they get too committed and too close, then it triggers your fear of intimacy. So there's a lot of affairs in this push and pull cycle.
Which, again, I mean, I guess maybe it's not weird, but it's weird to me that she came from a seemingly, like loving, normal family. Mom and dad were good, traveled with her parents. They, had brothers who loved her. I don't know. Like, it's a really interesting.
But she was also a product of the Great Depression, right?
Sure.
And environmentally, I think that can cause a lot of trauma. Maybe stuff we don't really have researched on like case by case basis. You know what I mean?
That's true. So when she married Virgil, her fourth husband, Virgil was living with his mother in Westwood. So they got married in Reno, but they met in Westwood, where she was living with her third husband, right? And he was 5 years her junior. And he was also one of those strapping lumberjacks that was employed by Red River Lumber Company.
So Virgil is husband number 4.
Virgil is husband number 4. They get married in Reno. And back in Westwood, the sawmill wasn't the only thing buzzing. After the divorce from Carol and the marriage to Virgil, the rumor mill was now in full swing. The taboo topic was quickly spreading in this close-knit town of Westwood, and by July 1941, right, just after a year after the two got married, Virgil and Gladys decided to move to Medford, Oregon. It was a new town and a new start for the darling couple. But alas, by the end of 1941, so within 6 months, 5 to 6 months,
Wow.
Gladys was moving back to Sacramento and filing for her 4th divorce.
Homegirl, Gladys.
Gladys has got,
There is so much to unpack in this box.
it's a lot. So at this point, I think we can understand that Gladys either has poor impulse control or is a hopeless romantic, or like you had said, like there's something deep-seated in this thing. But if you give Gladys a few bucks in a couple of months, she'll end up in a town, anywhere from 1 to 5 hours away from where she was, single and ready to mingle.
Girl.
In January 1942, remember, she got divorced at the end of 41. By January, a few weeks later, before her divorce was finalized, she met, enticed, and married 24-year-old Lieutenant Leslie Lincoln in Fort Ord, California.
Okay. I'm trying real hard to keep up here. So Virgil, she married and divorced after a few months, and then just weeks later,
she's now on marriage number 5, which is Lieutenant Leslie Lincoln.
Okay.
Gladys was 35 at the time, apparently aging like a fine wine. And on her marriage certificate, she stated that number 1, she was single, and number 2, she was actually 32. So this time she shaved 3 years off of her age.
Okay.
This time is a charm for Gladys because after 2.5 years, she was still married.
To Lieutenant Leslie.
To Lieutenant Leslie Lincoln. Now, granted, Lieutenant Lincoln was transferred from the West Coast to the East Coast for work, and he was literally not there for like 2 years. And Gladys, of course, decided to stay in California. But again, I feel like this is showing promise, right? Like she could have very easily divorced, but he's not there. So she has free reign, and he's sending her money.
Yeah.
During this whole deployment.
Yeah.
In 1944, right? So they got married in 1942. So 2 years later, 1944, Leslie was discharged from the service, and the two would move to Taft, California. And somewhere in that time, Gladys started having trouble sleeping. But luckily for her, Nimbutal was all the rage. And if a little bit of Nimbutal can solve your insomnia, then a lot would solve anything, right? It would solve a whole multitude of problems. And it was reported that Gladys was taking 10 times the suggested amount, and not at the 6 to 8 hour intervals, but every time she felt the need to take one.
Damn, Gladys cannot do anything in moderation.
I know.
Wow. She is so out of containment.
Go big or go home, Bailey. Go big and go home. So the result of this is obviously now we have a very sleepy, very groggy, very sad Gladys. And she's laying there and she's like, if only I could receive help from a doctor. If only she knew a doctor. And that's when she remembered the good doctor.
The chiropractor?
The chiropractor.
Let's help her with depression and insomnia.
Well, he's Dr. Bailey, W.D. Broadhurst, or as she liked to call him, Brody.
Brody.
And here we are, dearest Brody.
Oh, man, here we go.
Dearest Brody, memories of our nights together so many years ago still flood my dreams today. Remember that sweet little note?
Yeah. And the telegram?
That telegram? So we are now at August 20th, 1945, and that's when she sent the note to Brody, to Dr. Brody, asking if he would like to hear more of her story, and if so, to please write with your address if interested. 5 days later,
She's got to be love bombing these dudes.
let me tell
You
you
know what I
something.
mean?
You know how everybody's like, oh, there's plenty fish in the sea? I don't think that's true. I think if you have enough Gladyses out there, you have a substantially less amount of fish in that sea. So for all you people who are like, why can't I find a good man? Because Gladyses hoard them. They have like,
She was a man hoarder.
man
Did they
hoarder.
know? Like, did each successive man know, like, what husband number they were?
No. Well, sometimes they did. And I'll give you examples of what they knew.
Okay.
So 5 days later, Gladys receives a telegram from Dr. Broadhurst, which included his address. In his reply, he talked about a life that didn't turn out the way he had hoped, but he was ready for retirement now that his nephew, Floyd Adams, could take over the chiropractic business, because Floyd had also gone to the Palmer School of Chiropractic. And that was going to free up his time so that he could finally do what he had always wanted to do, which was be a rancher out there in Caldwell, Idaho.
There's not a good track record with this.
Not yet. That was August 25th. On September 10th, 1945, just 9 months after her husband had returned from service, Gladys responded with a lengthy letter to Brody, which highlighted, and I had to bullet point these because this chick wrote this dude a long letter.
Okay.
So, number 1, she was a widow with no children. Number 2, there was absolutely no doubt in her mind that Dr. Brody, saved her life 20 years ago when he treated her. Without his great skill and deep kindness, she would have surely taken her own life.
I don't like this. That is so manipulative.
Oh, number 3.
Okay.
WD, he was the angel that, quote, reached down and lifted her out of her depths during that time. Number 4, Gladys's dearly beloved Aunt Mary from Honolulu had recently died, leaving her almost $3 million.
Oh, she didn't.
Yes,
That
she
woman
did.
did not leave her $3 million after the Great Depression.
Yes, she did, Bailey.
No.
Honolulu was thriving back then.
Liar, liar, pants on fire.
Number 5, Gladys was so overwhelmed by her good fortune that she wanted to share that wealth with WD as a thank you for saving her life all those years ago.
This woman is next level.
But number 6, her attorney will handle everything, but advised her it will take a little bit of time to finalize. She doesn't have the money yet. It's coming. It's just going to take a little.
Whatever. Get off. This might as well be a cult case. I'm getting angry. Why am I getting so mad?
No, I told you. I told you. And then she sealed that sweet letter with a
No,
kiss.
she did not.
This one was actually a letter. Like, this was a handwritten letter because remember, he had sent her his address, which I need to research how telegrams work. Like, do they just get sent to the post office? And then when you get there, the postmaster's like, hey, you have a telegram?
I don't know, but did she literally seal that envelope with like a literal lipstick kiss?
I don't think so. But in my
Oh,
mind, she did. And she closed the letter out, signing it, quote, with enduring love, Gladys.
whatever, Gladys.
Over the next few months, while husband Leslie, we're still on husband Leslie, while husband Leslie was hustling to establish a career as a geologist for Standard Oil, which, by the way, Standard Oil was the company that John Rockefeller started,
Oh,
right? And
okay.
then he was taken to court, and the Supreme Court decided that he had a monopoly on the industry and made him split that company up,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
he became even more rich when they split it up. So that was the company that Leslie was working for back in the 40s.
Okay.
So while Leslie is there busting his hump at Standard Oil, Gladys was free to check the mail after she woke up from her Nimbital induced naps
Yeah.
and get her love letters from Dr. Broadhurst. Now, Dr. Broadhurst had a thriving chiropractic practice along with a 160-acre ranch outside of Caldwell, Indiana, and an even larger cattle ranch in eastern Oregon. He had married at one point years ago, it had ended in divorce and he didn't have any children, right? Like it
Okay.
was just him.
Yeah.
So in January 1946, 5 months after the letters had begun, Gladys wrote to Dr. Broadhurst proposing that they marry and then listed all the reasons why she would be the perfect bride. Dr. Broadhurst, I guess we can call him WD, right? Like we don't have to call him Dr. Broadhurst the whole
Okay.
time.
WD, yeah.
WD showed his sister, Sarah, all the letters and talked long and hard to his sister Sarah about it. And of course, Sarah had her doubts, but she wanted to see her aging brother happy, right? Like
Yeah.
he had been a bachelor for all these years and he seemed to be really, really happy with Gladys. So WD made a trip to Sacramento where Gladys was living. And I seriously don't know how they get from Taft to Sacramento because it's like a 4-hour drive. I don't know if she was still living in Taft with Leslie or if they had moved to Sacramento. But anyway, she meets up with WD in Sacramento at a hotel that he had checked into. Later that evening, WD and Gladys would share a kiss. WD would later write in a journal entry, the kiss would, quote, cause my love 1,000 strong flash into a full blossom.
This poor man.
Right? The biggest problem, of course, was her literal husband, whom she was still married to. But
Yeah, Leslie.
yeah, Leslie. But good old Gladys, she had a story for that as well. She explained to WD that Leslie had an evil, identical twin brother named Lester Lincoln. And they were so identical that the only way to tell them apart was by a little birthmark that was above one of the ears. And this maniacal twin brother had learned of Gladys's inheritance of the $3 million. He had assumed the identity of his brother Leslie and had been pretending to be Leslie for the past year.
Well, where was Leslie then?
Well, Leslie had died in London during an air raid in the midst of World War II. So poor Gladys thought that her doting husband that had come back from the war was obviously her husband, Leslie, just to find out that it was his evil twin brother Lester who was out to get her and her money and she was terrified.
Oh my goodness.
And WD believes this hook, line, and sinker and
Well,
swears to
yeah,
protect her at all
of
costs.
course, because like that's the thing, and I know it sounds ridiculous as we're talking about it now, but I mean, you have to remember, you people are very convincing, and
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think people walk around thinking the worst. Maybe us as true crime connoisseurs do, but I think like the average population probably doesn't think that every person is likely a serial killer or, like has a secret life.
11-year-old Bailey would have believed anything that Amy told her.
I know. Listen, I know.
So,
I literally remember one time, and like this is not my proudest moment, but I literally remember, I think it was my friend Cody Gerald, and he was in band, and of course, I was on dance team, and we were friends, and he said something like, he came up to me and he was like, so, I'm pretty sure it was Cody, and he was like so beside himself, and he was like, Bailey, did you know that they took gullible out of the dictionary? And I was just like, what? And he was like, yeah, like they haven't had, a revision of the dictionary in like 43 years, but, some board somewhere decided to take gullible out. And I was like, can they do that? Like I just was just like, okay, wow. I mean, you seem really upset about this. And I'm like, I don't know if I should say I'm so sorry or, like, I don't know how to feel about this. And he just laughed at me. He was like, oh my God, you're so gullible.
but here's the deal. If Cody had not laughed and said that, you would have come home and told us that Cody Gerald told you that. And mom and dad and I would have been like, Bailey, that's not true. Or I wouldn't have cared. But mom and dad would have been like, Bailey, that's
Right.
not true. And you would have been like, screw you guys. Cody
That
told
is
me.
100% true.
Well,
So all that to say, yes, people can be gullible. We're
yes, you
all
can be
guilty of
gullible.
being gullible, especially if people make it sound very convincing.
And she was very convincing.
Yeah.
So after the rendezvous with WD, Gladys goes back to Leslie and they file for divorce on April 24th, 1946.
You mean she filed for divorce from Lester,
Correct. Her,
her husband's evil twin.
her husband's evil twin.
Okay.
But by April 29th, they both decided to fight for their marriage and reconcile, which they did.
Hmm.
While they were mending their marriage, Gladys informed Leslie that she needed to visit family in Reno, Nevada. So she loaded a Greyhound. And who would be waiting for her in Reno?
WD.
You guessed it, WD. And on May 20th, 1946, Gladys walked down the aisle to her sixth husband. And on her marriage certificate, she stated that she was, again, not only single, but that girl was still 35. Gladys would be turning 40 in June. Because of the fake evil twin brother Lester, Gladys and WD decided it would be best to keep their marriage a secret.
This poor dude. I feel so bad for him.
Oh. After the steamy, newlywed, honeymoon type of weekend, WD returned home to his ranch and practice in Idaho, and Gladys returned home to her husband in California. She made sure to intercept the love letters that WD sent to his bride, right? But in mid-June 1946, Leslie got to the mailbox first. Leslie found the love letter from WD addressed to his loving wife. Leslie confronted Gladys, told his lawyer to add bigamy to the reason why he wanted divorce, and Gladys panicked. Because if WD finds out then what's going to happen?
Right.
So Gladys writes to WD and begs him to come and get her, to move her out to Idaho. They had planned that he would come out in July to move her out to Idaho, but she writes him and she's like, you've got to come now. Like, Lester, the evil twin Lester, is getting out of control. You've got to come now. And he says, I can't. I'm in the middle of a cattle roundup and I just can't get away from the ranch right now. So Gladys decides to go over WD's head and write his nephew, Floyd, who was now, of course, he was back from the war. He was taking over WD's practice, and Floyd had his wife and kids with him.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
This chick writes a novel to Floyd explaining, are you ready for all this? She explained to him that she's stuck in California with blood poisoning, which is going to result in her foot being amputated unless she gets medical attention, and she needs the good doctor, WD, to be there for support because she might die.
Okay, Gladys.
She goes on to apologize for her poor handwriting and blames it on the fact that she hasn't been able to eat for 5 days and is in terrible pain. But then asks him if WD had shared the news about her inheriting the $3 million from her dead aunt, and told Floyd, like, don't worry, you know, the money's going to be here any day now. I just wanted to make sure you knew about this, that WD had talked about it. Bailey, if only she hadn't stepped on that rusty nail. That's how she got the infection. She explained to Floyd that she stepped on that rusty nail, and that's how she got the blood infection, and that's why she's in this predicament. She apologizes for bothering him and then asks Floyd to please not fail her. Please don't fail me. She needed WD to come to her aid, closing the letter with love to all, then including a PS that goes on and on about how she was a nurse in the Army during the war, half of her brothers died, one has amnesia, and finally that the airmail she sent to WD has their marriage certificate in it, and it's very, very important that he gets this letter.
This woman is the same type of woman, if I was working with her, like, as if she were my client, she would be the type that would be crying and sobbing, and when I just give her my most deadpan, cut the shit, they would snap out of it, cross their arms, and be like, you didn't care at all that I was in distress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like 100% the vibes that I'm getting from this person.
Yeah, absolutely. So Floyd reads this letter and he is like, what the what
What
is
the
going
hell?
on?
Yeah.
Uncle WD has a wife, a secret wife, and she has, you know, this blood infection and she's a millionaire. And, you know, he's like, what the heck's going on? So, of course, he goes to WD and talks to him, and WD's like, yeah, you know, we got married in Reno, and okay, I'll see what I can do. Right. So I'm sure Floyd was kind of thinking like, this Uncle WD is going to be like, this lady's crazy. I don't even know who this lady is. But of course, WD's like, yes, no, she's my wife. We got married in Reno, and I'll figure out how to get to her. So WD zips up anything that he needs to zip up. He rushes out to California, gets out there. He loads up, you know, a drowsy, Nembutal addicted wife, brings her back to Idaho, has her examined by a doctor, because of course by then her leg is fine, right? Like she's cured and everything's fine. But of course his doctor friend is like, I think she's addicted to pills. Like, you guys might need to figure this out. Right. But Gladys is like, no, now that I'm with you, I'm fine. And I won't need to do this. I won't need this anymore.
This is wild. This woman is next level.
So he moves her out to Idaho. By August, mind you, Bailey, this is like 6 weeks after she's been in Idaho. By August, Gladys explains to WD that she needs to go back to California to take care of some business, right? Like she left in a hurry. She has some things that she needs to zip up.
You just
And
almost died and had your foot amputated, Gladys, and
yeah,
so you just need to go back to California?
yeah. Well, that's what he
Whatever.
said. That's what he said. And he was like, there's no way I'm going to let you go alone. I will find somebody to chauffeur you back to California. So they finally agreed. WD finally agreed to let her go back, but he would send someone to accompany her while he tended to the ranch. They decided Alvin Williams, a trustworthy young man that WD knew well, could handle chauffeuring Gladys back to California. And on August 5th, 1946, Alvin and Gladys left for California in WD's Chevy Coupe and with a handful of WD's cash.
And this isn't one of her ex-husbands, right?
No, this is just a ranch hand.
Okay. All right.
Working for him. But he was a nice kid, was pretty low key, had nothing, was not a threat or anything like that. By August 10th, 5 days into the trip, Gladys asked Alvin if she could give him a kiss on the cheek because he reminded her of her brother. The next kiss would be on the lips, and then the boots were knocking. While on their trip to California, the two went to the movies to see a show. While on their trip to California, the two went to the movies to see The Postman Always Rings Twice, which was a popular movie back in the late 40s, right? In the movie, the two lovers decide the only way that they can be happy is for the husband to be killed. Gladys looks to Alvin and says, "Gee, it's too bad something like that can't happen to the doctor."
No.
And the seed was planted. If Alvin could get rid of WD, Gladys would inherit his money, and the two could ride off into the sunset, just like the couple in the movie.
This is so sad. This is so sad. There are so many victims in this.
Yeah. On September 17th, we were at August 10th. On September 17th, the two are still on their trip to California. But on their way back home, they stop in Reno, and Gladys marries Alvin Williams by using the alias Elaine Hamilton. Alvin would become husband number 7.
Oh my gosh, this woman is off of it.
Bailey, they were gone for 7 weeks on this trip back to California. The whole time, WD is sending her letters. Again, I don't know how the post office worked back in the 40s, but she was getting these letters. Of course, she was returning letters. "I miss you so much. I'm sorry that this is taking longer than it's supposed to. I wouldn't, your love for me keeps me going," and all the things, and blah, blah, blah. After 7 weeks, these two are now just brimming with lust and money and murder, and they finally return home. WD is ready to have his beloved wife back and to take her out of the hands of Alvin, who he was now becoming a little bit suspicious of, right? I mean, naturally, you're with my wife for 7 weeks.
Right.
Like, come on. And he wouldn't blame
Right.
Gladys, right? Like, the whole time she's just like, "Thank you so much for sending Alvin with me," and blah, blah, blah. In the following weeks, Gladys would tell Alvin that killing WD would be the only way to secure their future together, and so they devised a plan. Once the plan was in place, Gladys reminded Alvin, quote, "Don't fail me. If you do, for God's sake, don't come back."
How old is Gladys now, and how old is this seventh husband of
Gladys
hers,
is
Alvin?
40 years old and Alvin is in his 20s. And
Okay.
WD, if you remember from way back in the beginning, he's 11 years her senior. So he's like 51,
Yeah.
right?
But I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
still
No, it's
very
not like he's
young.
not, 90. He's not 1 foot in the grave, but, you know, he's a little bit older. So the time comes, October 14th, 1946, was a cool, calm autumn day. Dr. W.D. Broadhurst, a respected chiropractor from Caldwell, Idaho, drove along a secluded road in eastern Oregon, unaware he was heading straight into a deadly trap. Alvin Williams stood by the roadside, pretending to have car trouble, signaling desperately for help, all part of the plan he and Gladys had devised. Little did the doctor know this apparent cry for assistance was the beginning of a sinister, premeditated murder. As WD stepped out of his car to help, Alvin attacked, striking him brutally on the head with a monkey wrench. WD, despite his age, stumbled a few steps, but didn't fall over. In fact, all he did was start cursing at Alvin, claiming he was going to kill him, and pulled a knife and started to charge Alvin. Alvin, determined to finish the job, pulled a shotgun, leveling it at WD's chest, and pulled the trigger. WD grabbed his chest and stumbled a few feet from the vehicle before falling dead in the middle of the county road.
Oh, that's so sad.
Alvin drove WD's truck and horse trailer up over the hill and released the horses. He then came back and pushed WD off the side of the road, but panicked when he saw a truck coming. So he loaded up and headed back into town. Once it was dark, he went back to where he had left WD's body, and after struggling to get him rolled up into a bedsheet and into his trunk, he was able to drive his car up a ways and dump the body near Cow Creek Hill and hastily attempted to conceal the crime. Alvin went back to Gladys to tell her the details of the murder, and she replied, quote, "Thank God. Go and destroy the evidence and come back as quick as you can." Gladys also instructed Alvin to change the wheels on his car so he wouldn't be connected to the murder. Sheriff Charles Glenn of Vail, Oregon, was informed on Tuesday, October 15th, by WD's nephew, Floyd, that his uncle had traveled up to that area in Oregon where his ranch was, but they haven't seen, he didn't come back. They went up there, they found his uncle's truck and the horse trailer, but there was no sign of the horses and there was no sign of WD. After Sheriff Glenn learned more about the twisted dynamics of Gladys and Alvin and WD in the 7-week trip and the money and the evil brother-in-law, right? He started having sneaking suspicions that Gladys and Alvin were at the center of WD's disappearance. Of course, Gladys had her own ideas to share about her beloved and missing husband, WD. She assured the officers that Alvin was not involved in this, that WD and Alvin were like brothers, and that she also viewed Alvin, like a son or a brother. They were just really great friends. There was no way that Alvin could have ever done anything like this. She then went on to tell the officers how her previous husband had died in the war and that his evil twin had tried to assault her and swindle her.
I hope this detective is like, sit down.
Right?
And stop talking.
Well, she even goes on to say they need to look into this Mr. Wells character because she had heard WD and Mr. Wells arguing just the day before, right? The day before he left, he was arguing with this Mr. Wells character. They question Alvin. Of course, everybody denies any involvement in the disappearance. But being that Alvin was really kind of the only person who was like, yeah, I saw him, leading up to his disappearance, they went ahead and decided to detain Alvin for further questioning. On Thursday, October 17th, Gladys, frightened and hysterical, shows the officers a note that was tucked under the front door. The note read, "Your cowboy strong arm didn't do it, but don't start anything, or I'll get you same as I did Doctor. I warned you, and I need some cash. Sweet Pea."
Sweet Pea.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet Pea was the nickname that Leslie had for his evil identical twin, Lester. And she knew that it was Lester who was writing her. He was out to get her.
Can we just talk about the family dynamics where a brother calls his evil twin Sweet Pea?
The fact that she not only made up this evil identical twin brother, but then she also made up the fact that his nickname was Sweet Pea.
Like, don't listen to Lester. Okay, Sweet Pea, shut your mouth. Sweet Pea, stop your conniving,
her nickname
okay? This is
her
ridiculous.
nickname was Flea. So, I don't know. Maybe people from the 1940s, are y'all okay?
Right?
The note was later proven to be written in Gladys's handwriting and on stationery that she owned.
Shocker.
While Gladys was producing fake letters from a fake brother-in-law, Lester, Alvin finally broke down and led the officers to the area where he had dumped WD's body. Officers found WD on Thursday, October 17th, exactly 1 month after Gladys's 7th marriage to Alvin Williams.
I can't with this woman.
Alvin Williams and Gladys Broadhurst were implicated in the murder of Dr. W.D. Broadhurst, who was found dead on October 17th, 1946. Gladys was convicted of first-degree murder in 1948, and after only 3 hours of deliberation, the unanimous jury recommended life imprisonment as her sentence. She did not testify during her trial, relying on the defense of lack of evidence to support the state's claim of conspiracy. Alvin was also found guilty, although specific details regarding his sentencing is less documented.
Right.
Alvin Lee Williams entered the state penitentiary on May 14th, 1947, and was paroled on August 14th, 1957. His life sentence amounted to 10 years and 3 months. He would go on to marry in July 1957, raise a family with his wife, and lived in Idaho until his death in 2010.
Wow.
Gladys Broadhurst served 9 years of her life sentence before being paroled on July 27th, 1956. This early release raised questions and discussions surrounding the justice system and its treatment of female offenders at the time.
Yeah.
The records indicated that she continued to maintain her innocence throughout her imprisonment. Then on January 15th, 1961, this telegraph was received. "Dearest Leo."
No, Chelsea. No.
"Memories of our nights together so many years ago still flood my dreams today. I have never forgotten you. How could I ever forget a man like you? I'd love to tell you my story. Please write with your address if interested. Gladys Ralphs Broadhurst, 111 Oregon Street, Salem, Oregon." Gladys married her 8th husband, Leon John O'Shea, in Marion County, Oregon on May 2nd, 1961, They returned to Sacramento, where they lived until her death on August 14th, 1973. And that, Bailey, is the life and destruction and absolute craziness of Gladys. I guess technically by the end of it, she was Gladys O'Shea, because that's what her tombstone reads.
That is wild. I feel so bad for WD. I mean, I feel bad for all of her husbands, right? Like she's a super manipulator, con artist, you
So when
know?
you were,
And she just love bombed these men.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, and just you're the most awesome, amazing, handsome, awesome person ever. You know, and these poor guys are just like, you know, oh, finally, like I find this beautiful woman who loves me for
well, and I
me.
think that
And
is the kicker. I think that by all accounts, she really was like, she was stunning, right? Like she was beautiful and lively and all the things, right? I don't know if her husbands were all, I mean, they didn't seem to be, bottom of the barrel guys. But when you were making that analogy of it's just like fishing for a marlin, and you were like, you catch this marlin, you take a picture of it, and then you throw it back in. If anybody has fished or does fishing in any shape, way, or fashion, you know that more often than not, these fish will swallow the hook, right? And so you have to end up clipping the line,
yeah.
but that hook is still in them. And it makes me think that the odds of them surviving once they have this hook embedded in them, because if you pull it out, it kills them, right? So you leave
Right.
it in there. And I'm no like expert fisherman,
Yeah.
right? But to me, I'm like, I think that's how this woman was. Like she would put her hook in these guys, but then just clip the line and they would be sent off with that hook still in there. Like there's no telling how much trauma, how much damage a single person
Yeah.
did to 8 individual people. And there are no reports on the last husband. I mean, obviously they were married for, I don't know what, 12
12
years or
years.
something like that. But even still, it just is, it's baffling. It's baffling to me that you can, like, how do you sleep at night, right? Like, how do you string along all these people?
I just think that people, I don't know. I mean, this goes back to a lot of conversations we have about like normal people being able to do like really bad things. And I know, like, for me, when I work with these like serial daters or marriers or whatever, their ability to compartmentalize and remove themselves from any sort of like emotional equation is uncanny. I mean, it just it and it's not a scheme. It's not a you know what I mean? There's I don't know, man. I just and it takes so much. It takes so much work to like have these different boxes touch, right? And like reintegrate a
Mm-hmm.
person as a whole before that they can even comprehend like right and wrong and
Sure.
empathy and sympathy and take accountability.
What's really interesting, and if you guys found this case interesting, I would recommend. So we're always like, oh, go read the book. We recommend the book. And that is obviously true. I would recommend the book. But specifically, why I would recommend this book. So, number one, this Patrick Gallagher, his granddad was the defense attorney in this case. So that's how he got turned on to all of this.
Oh,
And he had access to all of these records. And Bailey, he has all the letters. Like it's just the tip of the
wow.
iceberg, the stuff that was said. And what's really crazy is there's a lot of truth in her fantasies. Like she really did have an aunt.
Yeah.
She really did have an aunt that lived in Hawaii. You know what I mean? Like, so it was just enough truth mixed into this thing that I think she was able to carry on these lies because, again, there was a lot of truth in them. She just embellished.
Right.
And I bet you any amount of money, like if you were to find these letters, right? Like if any of her husbands were to find any of these letters, it was like, see, I really do have an aunt, right? Like she could justify a lot of this. But like I said, it's extremely,
Right.
extremely fascinating to go through. I mean, pretty much the second half of this book is court documents and pictures and handwritten letters that he has, photocopied and these telegrams. I mean, Bailey, it's wild. Oh, old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, I just feel so bad. And maybe this is countertransference for me, but I feel so maybe sometimes extra bad for male victims of stuff like this because I think, like there's stereotypes, and I'm not saying they're accurate, but there's stereotypes of like, guys are dogs and they're, like bound to cheat. Like that's what men in our society do and blah, 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 blah. But I think to be a male and to have been cheated on and to kind of be hoodwinked this significantly, I think, at least from my perspective, when I work with betrayed men, there's an extra layer of
Yeah.
shame for them because they're supposed to be, again, bell-shaped curve stereotype in our Western society. They're expected to, be stronger and be all of these things. Like they
Right.
shouldn't be hoodwinked by
Right.
this. You know what I mean? And it just, I don't know, man. This case just makes me sad. Deception to that level makes really my heart goes out to, to betrayed partners, man. Having been a betrayed partner, I know how absolutely painful it is and how
Wow.
bewildering it is. And it's just so surreal when it's happening to you, and it just makes me so sad for WD, and he
He
was
was
just minding
minding
his
his own
own
business,
business.
right? And it sounds like he was minding his own business twice. I know it takes a tango,
Right,
but
twice over.
and from all accounts, I never got an inkling that these men were cheating on her. You know what I mean? It's not like they both were in this really toxic, they were both cheating on each other. There was infidelity on both ends. I mean, they were wanting
Right.
to reconcile and they were wanting to work things out. And it sounded like she really was targeting some pretty solid, like,
Yeah, she's a predator, like, absolutely, she was doing exactly what Mike Bollinger did, is she found men with whatever weaknesses she needed to weave her manipulative,
oh.
predatory charm. And it's no different than if a man were to do that, right? It's the same exact
And then by
behavior.
all accounts, again, I mean, they talked one time that she might have had a job when Leslie was stationed on the East Coast. But beyond that, she never
Yeah.
worked. She just used their money. She just used them. Like she truly was such a parasitic personality, in my opinion.
I just there was a point earlier, and I'm gonna wrap this up because I don't just want to bleed on and on. But when you were talking about like something about her being a victim, and it just made me laugh because it reminded me of that scene from the Addams Family when Wednesday's paired up with Amanda and she's like, "I'll be the victim," and Wednesday's like, "All of your life." Right? So it just made me like, she's just this victim
Oh,
mentality, man. It just bleh. But anyways, I have to say I am not a huge fan of old-timey cases, but you did a really great job presenting this, and it did not feel
yeah,
like, you know what I mean? Like this old, boring kind of like, okay, like that has
yeah,
no relevance anymore. Because I think everything you covered is
yeah.
still super
I
relevant
do.
today,
I think
right?
I again, a tale as old as time. So Lock your doors, people. Get a background check. Check for aliases.
Yeah, and yes. And double check if your person's like, it's my evil twin by AKA Sweet Pea. Like, definitely
And if they
think about that one
suggest
a
getting
little bit.
married in Reno, say, that's hard pass for me. Nothing good gets
Yeah,
married.
after like 4
Nothing good comes
days.
out of Reno, Nevada,
Yeah.
people. Sorry if you live in Reno. Love you guys.
Well, that is a wild, wild tale. That is a wild, wild west of a tale, man. And weird that it was in
Super
Caldwell,
weird.
Idaho, too. Super
And
weird.
that's it,
All
babe.
right. Well, Chelsea, you did a great job. Thanks for presenting such an awesome case, and shout out to Patrick for writing such an awesome book. And as always, you guys, thanks for hanging out with us through this wild and crazy betrayal affair wild ride.
And as always, we'll catch you on the wild side.
Bye, guys.
Later, gators. Hey, Wildside Tribe, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Wildcide Podcast.
Make sure to tune in on Wildcide Wednesdays. New episodes will drop each Wednesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We would love to hear from you, so if you have a wild case recommendation, email us at wildsidepodcast@gmail.com. That's Wildside with a C. Or share your thoughts in the comments below.
As always, if you haven't heard it today, you're loved, you're worthy, and you're valuable. And we'll catch you on
The flip side.